So today's discussion is on threats to free expression, particularly looking at book banning. And so to sort of set the conversation, I just want to share a bit of data first, and then we'll leap into our actual conversation. And so national data on book bans from PEN America's new report, Banned in the USA, The Mounting Pressure to Censor, shows an escalation of book bans and censorship in classroom and school libraries across the United States. This year, we saw a 33% increase in individual book bans from the 21-22 school year. From July 2022 through June 2023, there were over 3,000 instances of individual books being banned, affecting almost 1,600 unique titles and almost 1,500 different authors, illustrators, and translators. And then within Texas itself, the total number of book bans currently stands at 625 across 12 districts. And so, before we get into book banning proper, I'd love to sort of set the conversation in why you two write. If I could hear sort of about how your work responds to the world around you, what you think your writing does in the world, and why don't we begin with Luis for that question, and then we'll go over to Roxane.
Well, yeah, I was born in Tijuana, and all you have to do is be from Tijuana to learn what the human heart is like from people not from Tijuana. And my motivation, I didn't even realize it was to bear witness from the beginning, that the people that I knew and grew up with and ultimately represented were, I thought, the most fabulous, interesting, real people in the world. And then we left Tijuana and settled in San Diego. And I found out suddenly that Tijuana was filthy, dirty, sinful, prostitutes, dope. I thought, what? What happened? And, so it became really important to me, not only to bear witness, but to be the witness, because everybody had stories, everybody had depth, everybody had feelings, and the majority of the people that I was with in my boyhood didn't write, didn't tell stories except amongst themselves, didn't have access to an audience or a public. And I don't know how Roxane felt, but of course, when you're a poor kid and you're arty, you want to be a star, right? You want to make some money, man. But that drive transformed more and more to bearing witness. And the more resistance I got, the more truculent I got. And I'll just throw this out as a Mexicanness, but my dad's nickname for me was the Mule. Ay, Luis, eres mula, cabrón. Because every time they tried to force me to do something, I would just dig in. I didn't know why. Maybe it was this, that, there was a calling somewhere.
I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm a first-generation American. My parents are from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And growing up, there weren't really stories about people like me. And when I went off to high school and college, people were always astounded to learn that Black people live in Nebraska. And indeed they do. And not only that, there were like 5 Haitian families growing up in Nebraska. So, and we all knew each other, of course, because we all know each other. And I wanted to write stories about people like me, but then, of course, like Luis, it evolved, and I recognized that I could articulate my understanding of the world as much as anyone else. And a lot of times people would say, why you? And my rejoinder was, why not me? Yeah. I think that we're all entitled to share our understanding of the world, to bear witness, and to bring attention to the issues that matter to us. And I've had the very fortunate privilege of being able to do so for the past 25 years or so. And every day I wake up and I realize I get to do my favorite thing all day if I want. And I never do it all day. But I still get to do it. And that drive to tell other people's stories, to tell my stories is still there. And fortunately, it has not yet gone away.
I think off of both of your answers, there's this interesting note of both reflecting your own stories to different audiences and also sharing and bearing witness to those stories around you. And in this current era of book banning, we're seeing a focus on silencing narratives from marginalized voices, voices that deal with sort of America's history with race, America's history broadly, with sexual assault, with LGBTQIA plus identity. And both of those are topics you both write about or appear, or all of those, some of those topics are topics that appear across your books. And I'd be curious to hear what it means when you talk about this act of witnessing, reflecting your own life, to hear those stories are being banned. And maybe why don't we start off with Roxane and then we'll do Luis next.
Well, I was pretty surprised when I learned that some of my books, well, all of my books are banned in one place or another. Because like one of them is a graphic novel that's a fantasy story about a man that flies an air machine into the sun. And so I'm not sure what sun lovers really were like, that book has to be banned in 8 states. But it's disheartening. Of course, book banning is not new. The first book was banned in 1637, and the first book burning was in 1650. And so this is something that humans have been doing for a very long time because knowledge is power, and I don't mean that in a cheesy way. I do mean that the more you learn and the greater your understanding of the world, the more power you have, even if you don't necessarily have ways of using that power. And so when you write about sexuality, when you write about race, inequality, any form of bigotry, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable because they have to hold themselves accountable for the ways in which they support systemic bigotries. And to know that my work is being banned, it's not something that I wear as a badge of pride because books should not be banned. But I think I'm doing something right when people are threatened. And what's really important is that we have to remember that local elections matter. Running for your local library boards and school boards, it's not glamorous at all, but we should not be dictating what other people read. It's not our business. And we should not be afraid of knowledge. We should not try to elide history from books and from our students, our children, because then they're going to go to college and be embarrassed because they don't know, for example, that the Holocaust happened.
Bravo. It's a strange experience to go through these kind of things. I just want to tell you 2 brief things, and maybe it'll put it in perspective for you. One is that I wrote a book called The Devil's Highway, and it came out, and I was at the Tucson Festival of Books walking toward my event, and a TV crew stopped me. And they said, can we talk to you for a second? And I said, sure, I'm trying to get to a gig. No, just take a second. I said, okay. And they put the mic in my face and said, how do you feel about your book being banned in Arizona? I said, excuse me, what? It's been banned in Arizona. I said, do you know why? Yes. They said that it's got a satanic title, The Devil's Highway. And secondly, anti-American bias. And I remember thinking, certainly reason will win here. I said, it's the name of a place on every Arizona map. Are you going to edit the maps to get the devil out of them? And the second thing I said was, they teach it at the Border Patrol Academy. If it's American enough for the Border Patrol, you could probably read it. And I thought, this is ridiculous. And I went on. And that was what began the massive Arizona book banning orgy. Your Texan heroes, the libro traficantes, they got together in response to what happened in Arizona. And if you don't know them, they're here. They're going to be doing events here. They decided instead of being narcotraficantes like everybody thinks we are, let's be book smugglers. And they got all the banned books and they drive them into the places they're banned and pass them out. You know, action, creative action, I think, is a brilliant response to it. And the other thing I just want to mention to you is that I had another book, and it was a novel. It's called Into the Beautiful North, and I wanted to honor people that I knew or people that I respected, including people who were trying to walk to make the world better and get somewhere else, and then send it back home. So it got some resistance, but it was picked as an all-region read in Western Oregon, and the school districts banned it. And my wife and I naively went to talk to the big man, the head principal and the principal's, and we went into his office and he was all, pleasant. Yeah, hi, Louis. I said, hi, sir. And I said, so, we wanted to talk about why is the book banned? And he said, well, it's got a homosexual hero. I said, yeah, I bet you have gay students, so what's wrong? And he said, well, we have gay bashing here. And so they got rid of the book. And what warmed my heart was the parents took it over sort of as an independent study and made sure their kids could read it and talk outside of school. But the argument that we have gay bashing here, I didn't understand what he was saying, honestly. That your book's going to cause more gay bashing? I don't know why. And so once again, parents took a step to circumvent that. And I think the answer always is a creative and smarter response. Because the people who are doing this are sly and they're sneaky, but they ain't that smart. And so you can flummox them. And if you should publish something that gets you bad stuff, I'm sure we both get really weird communications. When the Devil's don't we? When the Devil's Highway came out, then the white supremacists started in on me. And they would write to me and I swear to you, tell me that they had to do me the favor of exterminating my children to stop the infestation. And my wife smartly would get up in the morning and delete my emails because she knew I couldn't keep quiet. But when I got one, here's what you do. Anybody who gets one, correct their English.
That's actually my favorite pastime.
Isn't it the best?
It's amazing how terrible at grammar and spelling racists are. I love that for them.
Yeah, always give them a C- and put your comments on it and send it back to them. And I swear to you, they will write back maybe once. Well, I'm gonna get you so bad, man. That was it, and they disappear.
Well, so while we're here, I'm curious too, how do you think about this response in terms of how it affects your writing? So when the people who say your books are dangerous reach out, does that change how you write? And more broadly, like, how do you think it affects younger authors to write in this environment where they know there's this wide sort of censorious movement they have to get published in?
Oh, hi. It doesn't affect my writing at all. Frankly, it makes me lean into it and do it more. And I mean, when you tell me not to do something, all of a sudden I have a burning desire to do it. And I hope that it's not deterring young people from telling the truth and from recognizing reality, articulating what it means to be queer or trans or Black or Mexican or Middle Eastern, anything. Because when we start to deny ourselves the right to tell our stories, we lose parts of ourselves. And I think we lose something incredibly vibrant in our culture when we strive for some kind of Christian ethno-state where everyone looks the same, thinks the same, acts the same. First of all, you guys like tacos too much. You can't be doing all that. Just saying. And so it's just important to continue to remind people that diversity is not just a word. It's a way of being, and it's a practice, and it's a reminder that we share this world with other people.
I got nothing after that.
Well, so then let's move it a bit away from sort of you as writers, and I'd be curious to hear about the responses you've gotten from students and readers who haven't been able to access your books. And what have you heard? What is that made you think? And why don't we begin with Luis for this one, and then Roxane?
It's overwhelming, and it's why you do this. I mean, you know, of course, our incredible fame and fortune is very attractive, but no, it's you know, I don't know about you, but you know, I was the kid in the terrible tenement bedroom on the floor listening to Leonard Cohen, writing in a notebook. I didn't know this would happen. And at the time when I got started, there weren't a whole lot of me's out there publishing. And I was told the first thing from the publisher in New York that I was trying to get into. I was working as a missionary, I'll admit it, but as not a preaching missionary, but feeding the poor for years in Mexico. And I wrote a book about it, my first book. And the first publisher I submitted it to said, nobody cares about starving Mexicans. And I was all self-righteous. Yes, this is why I have written it. Which wasn't necessarily a good, you know, commercial move. But you're driven by those things that burn inside. And I'm telling you, you ask about students, that's the most astonishing and rewarding thing of all of it, is meeting young people who saw themselves in your book or felt that, you know, we could understand them or listen to them, or they could come out to us. And you come out in so many ways, you know. I have a lot of, because my family has a history of certain gang relations, I get gang members who come to me and they're very ashamed. And they're like, I want to write something, man, but I can't. Why not? I'm gang related. And I said, so's my family. What? You know, come on, tell me your story. That's a miracle. And the book that got banned for the gay bashing was in the Rio Grande Valley, talking about it. Most of the students couldn't give a darn about it, but this young person came and sat next to me, and the gay character is named Tacho. And there's a whole story about Tacho. He was a real person by that name in a little town in Sinaloa. I first met him in 1970. It was the first person who was out that I'd ever seen or heard of, in a place where it was very dangerous for him. And he made himself this incredible mainstay of his hometown, so that everybody, instead of, you know, pointing him out as, there he is, there's the queer guy, he was our Tacho. It was a work of political genius. And I made him a hero of the book under his own name. And I just want to say that my cousins took him the book when it came out. And ever since then, he tells people, I told you I was special. And he keeps it with him. But this student came and sat next to me and was very reticent and leaned over and said, can I ask you a question? And I said, of course. And the person said, is Tacho single? Oh, man. I said, you know, Tacho's real and Tacho's still single. Probably a little old for you, but, you know, those things, that it's about the humanity. That's what moves me. And I feel it's impossible, and I tell this to my students every semester. One of my main rules is, because people always ask me, well, why are your books funny if they're about such terrible things? I say, because we're funny. We're funny. It's one of the sacred things that unites us. And if you can sit down with the other and have a good laugh, not an evil laugh, not a mocking laugh, laugh together, eye to eye, how do you get up from that table and say, well, those people are all pigs? You can't. You can't. So I think, all the things that I try to do to please myself aesthetically, I'm also very conscious, I think, of trying to do at least a little bit of either healing or reconciliation between readers, because it's turned out, weirdly, I have a really wide array of readers. I thought I would get a very small niche, but it turns out that people read it and they often forgive me for my liberal ways.
I tend to meet a lot of readers, and it's always gratifying to encounter them. And when I hear that my books have been taken away from them and banned, I'm happy to just send them my books.
Yeah.
And make sure that at least that person has access to something that they wanted. But I also recognize that that's not actually going to solve this problem. When you do it one-on-one, you can do it, but it doesn't make people stop banning books. And so I try to listen to whatever readers want to share about how they connect with my writing, and I try to talk about the importance of that. Like Luis, I thought I was writing for a very niche audience of the 4 Black girls from Omaha, but it turns out that people from all walks of life have connected to my work in one way or another, and that has been very humbling and one of the biggest surprises of my career. And so when someone connects and can say, I know what that feels like, I know what it feels like to be in a human body, I know what it feels like to be vulnerable, to be hurt, and then someone wants to take that away from them, it just infuriates me, and it makes me want to write even more and make sure that more people read my work, not because of vanity, but because so many people just need to know that they are not alone and that they are not the only people who have experienced trauma or have experienced isolation or any of the other things that we tend to write about in our work. And it just is fuel more than anything.
No, that's such a good way to approach it, to use it as an inspiration point, to think about those people who you wouldn't expect to connect with your books, but the expansion of your audience. And so a bit off of that, I'm curious, what were the first books you read where you saw yourself? And what did it mean to see yourself in a book?
I don't know that I saw myself, but the first book where I felt like, oh, I wish that she was my sister, was Little House on the Prairie.
Yeah.
And I know that the books are flawed, but in 1978, 1979, those books were everything to me, because it was a story about an ordinary girl from the plains whose life was rendered extraordinary by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And I still reread those books to this day because they are really good. And I just thought, I can matter. I can just be an ordinary girl and have an interesting story. And then the second book I really saw myself in was it's not that I saw myself, it's that I felt a kinship, and that was Beloved by Toni Morrison.
Oh, Lord, yeah. That's amazing. So a little bit of background here. My mom was the only American in my family. But the Mexicans were the blonde, blue-eyed ones. Go figure. My grandmother's name was Guadalupe McMurray. So, and so there was a very strong and relentless Mexican presence, obviously, and I spoke Spanish first and all that. And my mother was trying to get America into the mix, and she decided to do it through literature. And she read me Dickens, which I thought, what's going on, man? I don't get what's he talking about, And she'd get a British accent, The Artful Dodger. I thought it was curious when. I was like, so she gave that up and switched to Mark Twain. And I got to say, Tom Sawyer blew my mind, and it was kind of a science fiction book to me. Giant River, what's that? We don't have those in Tijuana and San Diego. All of that stuff and his presence, his voice, the American voice, made me crazy. And I do confess this every time I talk about it. And Becky Thatcher. Yeah, my first literary girlfriend, I was like, wow, dude, are you kidding me? And I have to say that later, it was Rudolfo Anaya's Bless Me Ultima. I thought, oh my God. And somehow I understood that we can be a weave. We're all weaves in this country. And so that became, instead of a kind of a liability, it felt like to me, I always felt a little alien. I started thinking, yeah, this is it. This is what being American. If you want to know what being an American looks like, I'm this version. You're that version. You're that. And we're all basically the same if we'd only pay attention to it with our fabulous, delicious flavors.
Ooh, and in a couple of minutes, we'll be moving over to the audience Q&A. So if you could start thinking of your questions, and you can line up in the center aisle where you see the microphone.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so as a final question before we move on to the audience Q&A, I think we've discussed book banning specifically, but I'd be curious to hear what you think are other threats to free expression currently happening today that we should all think of and be aware of.
Well, I think state legislatures overriding the will of the people and creating laws to circumvent what the voters enact is a huge problem. I think conservative legislatures trying to impose their will on college curricula is a huge problem. Because it's not just that they want to ban books, it's that they want to ban certain forms of education as well. And the minute you start doing that, you create a populace that is so ignorant that they are going to be willing to go along with anything. And that, of course, is the end goal. And I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but look at Florida. It's right there. And it's going to happen in many places. They're dismantling the humanities in almost every state. In West Virginia, they're getting rid of foreign languages at the University of West Virginia, or it might be WVU, one of the two. And they have suggested using Duolingo to take the place of foreign language instruction. And so that is, frankly, even more terrifying than banning books, because when you start to remove knowledge from people in such a systematic manner, you have to wonder how far they'll go. And it seems like there is nothing they won't try in order to control what we know and how we learn it. And so that's what I find particularly weird and problematic.
Yeah, it's exactly where I was going as well, because, you know, we have, well, not anymore, but we had 3 rounds of high school kids and our children, and you know, when you go to the high schools and the libraries are gone.
Yeah.
It's all like AV stuff, or look it up on your phone, or that's shocking to me that there's no book. And our son started telling us, well, it's a post-literary world, Dad.
Oh.
And I thought, in fact, I asked him, you know what got the house you're living in, right? That terrifies me, and whatever agenda any administration or any school, they've become little fiefdoms, I think. And one of the things that you see is control of flow. And being a professor of creative writing, it's really shocking to me to meet so many people who come into the program thinking, you know, I'm going to be a writer. It's probably easy. It's going to make me famous, which I want. A lot of money.
They're in for such a rude awakening.
We could give them a little workshop, and I do. But to meet people over and over who don't read, haven't read, don't know who anybody is so shocking to me. Toni Morrison, they're like, huh, who? And it's so bad that it's even culturally seeped in. There's a kind of myopia culturally. The day Prince died, I went into class, and they're like, how you doing, professor? I said, I'm sad. Why? You haven't heard? No, Prince died. Prince who?
Oh.
I said, Prince. They're like, Prince of what? And I'm stupidly up there, like my parents with, Rudy Valley to me. I said, Prince, Purple Rain. They're like, I thought, oh my God, it's over.
Failed them.
It's over.
Automatic F.
Yeah, I should have. You're so right. But I think there is some, I don't want to be paranoid or whatever, but there is an insidious power at play that is making us forget things that give us connections and depth and alternative thought, and just ask questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, and I'm trying to learn as a dad. Our youngest daughter is an anthropologist, and she's trying on everything. For a while, she was a follower of Odin. And then she thought, to hell with Odin, Freya. So she's a feminist Viking for a while. And, she's studying ancient cultures and realizing all these things that I think are threads that have always united us as people. We're always trying to deal with the same questions, the same power plays, the same familial things. And that's interesting to me. So I don't know what the answer is except more books. Many more books.